Perfect. Okay. Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar, Peace of Mind, a Caregiver's Guide to Contingency Planning. My name is Marjan, and I am the Education and Learning Lead at Family Caregivers of BC. And I have here with me my colleague Ibukun, who is our Caregiver Support Manager, and will be presenting on the topic of contingency planning today. So I would like to first respectfully acknowledge the Lekwungen peoples of whose unceded territory the FCBC office is located, as well as the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wasanek peoples, whose longstanding relationship with this land continues to this day. And we're just very grateful for the opportunity to live, work, and learn on this beautiful land. So before we dive into the heart of our webinar on contingency planning, I'd like to just take a moment to go over the structure of our webinar and the important that we do here at FCBC. So everyone will remain on mute and cameras will be off for the duration of the webinar. You're welcome to share your reflection and provide feedback using the chat box feature displayed at the bottom of your screen. And please use the Q&A feature to ask any questions at any point in time during the webinar, and we will be happy to respond during the 5-minute question period at the end. All right, so a little bit about Family Caregivers of BC. We are a nonprofit charity and local community-based program in Greater Victoria, dedicated to the well-being of family caregivers since 1989. And we're also the first of its kind in Canada. We have also been serving BC since 2010 and are part of the Ministry of Health's Patients as Partners initiative. FCBC has 3 key pillars, which include caregiver support, education, and engagement and collaboration. And we are also the home of Caregiver RX, which is our innovative model designed to make health systems caregiver friendly. So just to go a little bit into the details of our pillars, we have our BC Caregiver Support Line that you can call Monday to Friday from 8:30 to 4. We have one-to-one emotional support, caregiver coaching, healthcare navigation, and support groups. We also provide webinars, such as this one, on various topics for caregivers and healthcare providers, as well as learning tools, podcasts, newsletters. And we also have many collaborations with various organizations and are part of regional, provincial, and national committees and advocacy, and much, much more. So I will now hand over the presentation to Ibukun to guide us through today's topic.
Thank you very much, Marjan, for the introduction, and welcome again, everyone, to today's webinar. Would be taking a dive into understanding contingency planning a little bit more. I imagine some of us are not totally unfamiliar with this topic, while for some persons it might be pretty new. But in today's webinar, we would be trying to understand what contingency planning means, why it is important, the key components of contingency planning, and a care plan overview. We would also be taking some time to review a case scenario, which we hope as much as possible it's going to be hands-on, such that at the end of this session, this webinar, everyone would feel somewhat confident to come up with a plan in their role as a caregiver. Next slide, Marjan, please. So what is contingency planning? To some persons, this might sound like a very big word and something that you would normally hear in a business setting. but it simply could be described as a backup plan. Now, taking our mind away a little bit from caregiving, and imagine that we are planning a birthday party for maybe our grandson or our son, one of our child, and we're planning for this party to be outdoor, but all of a sudden it starts to rain. What do we do? Do we have an option B, option C, or something? For example, in that case, we would maybe consider something like having the party indoors. If we had planned for it to be a big, very activity-based one, we could have it indoors, close-knit, and even more intimate. And that is what a contingency plan is all about. It's about planning for a time when we don't know what would happen, but we want to be prepared as much as possible to still be able to take a step. Now, in the context of caregiving, as a caregiver, we want to make a contingency plan because it helps to support the caregiver and the care recipients to have a smooth transition if perhaps something happens to the caregiver. It doesn't always have to be a bad emergency. Something could just come up and they might not be able to do the things that they would normally do for their care recipient, maybe a parent, a child, a spouse, for example, a vacation, or an unexpected illness, which is what the case scenario would be about today. Contingency plan helps us to organize information and designate backup caregiving activities and planning for emergencies. And there could be different kinds of emergencies as we would explore in our workbook in the course of the presentation. Marjan. So I talked a little bit about the benefits of making a contingency plan, particularly a caregiver contingency plan, and I would go deeper into this. Number one, it helps to ensure a smooth transition of care. So if someone, say a daughter is caring for their mother or their father, and all of a sudden they feel a little bit ill, both the caregiver and the care recipient, they are not at loss regarding what could happen to either one of them. And this links closely to the point that it helps to reduce anxiety and have a continuity of care for the person that we are caring for. It reduces stress for the caregiver and the care recipient, like I said earlier, and it helps to provide clear guidance for those stepping in. So in that instance, the brief instance that I made, so if the daughter is not able to care, they probably have another daughter or an aunt or a family friend who could easily step in, and all of these details would be documented in the contingency plan. But if we don't think ahead of this, it will be difficult to navigate in a time when they're already in that situation and they might feel a little bit out of control, which could contribute to stress. Another important reason for creating a contingency plan as a caregiver is that it helps to prevent disruption of medical and non-medical care for our loved ones. So if we have a plan in place for what would happen if something that we don't know when it will happens, it kind of helps to provide details regarding the next steps to take in that situation. So for example, medical needs could be what medications is this person taking? When would they normally take it? Do they have any upcoming appointments? Who is responsible for transporting them to appointment, for example? And would see this, all of this in more details when we are discussing with the workbook. So in order for you as a caregiver to be able to create your own contingency plan, it's important for us to be familiar with some of the key components that we would normally find in a contingency plan. Like I mentioned earlier, for example, the care plan for this person, which includes their medical and non-medical routine, medications, medical appointments, personal care routine, some activities that they enjoy. Another key component of the contingency plan for as a caregiver is, which is very important, is to be able to identify legal and financial documents that are important to keep and have and keep to be able to ensure continuity of care for this person. For example, is the current caregiver, the primary caregiver, are they the POA for this person? That's the person holding the power of attorney. Are they their health representative? And if something happens to this primary caregiver, who is the next person in line who could step in and continue to care for this person and make it look as though, as much as possible, to reduce disruption in care for the care recipient. In the contingency plan would also see components about backup caregiver, and all of these components, they are closely linked because what we're trying to target is to ensure continuity of care, and not to say that the role of the primary caregiver is something that could be easily substituted, but we are trying to plan to know that as much as possible, there is no disruption, and the care recipient is able to continue to receive care if the primary caregiver needs to be away. Another component is the emergency preparedness. There are different kinds of emergencies that could happen, even though they are not, they probably are the kind of emergencies that might not happen in 2 years, in 5 years, 10 years, or they might never even happen. But what is important in this case is that we have a plan, or at least an idea of what we can do to salvage the situation as much as possible. For adventure, this happens. And lastly, but also very important, is to have a regular review and update to the contingency plan, because it's a living document. And this means that it can be and it should be regularly reviewed, because situation will change either in the health condition, the medical condition of the person we are caring for, or even sometimes a caregiver becomes a care recipient, and between two partners, we see instances where care responsibilities shift. Say, for example, a wife has been caring for their spouse, and then that has gone on for maybe 5, 6 years, and then all of a sudden the other spouse had like a major surgery, and the person who was being cared for before, because their condition was more like chronic, it's being managed. They tend to be the one caring for this other partner who is now a care recipient, and because they have more acute condition that is being managed at a time. What goes into a care plan? It's quite similar to the last slide, but this is even more detailed, and it is the minute details and specifics of what we would normally see in a contingency plan. So the care recipient personal information, we want to know as much as possible. Rather, we want to detail or document as much as possible information in that document, such that anyone who is picking up the document, without asking too much questions, they are able to have an understanding of the person's condition, their likes, their dislikes, their hobby, the things they like to do, what time of the day, what kind of meals, do they have any allergies? So as much as possible information, we want to document that in the contingency plan. And like I've been mentioning earlier, because most of the time, the reason why our loved ones, a relative, are being cared for is because they have a medical condition, or they are as a result of maybe a disability, or they are just aging gracefully and as expected, but they do have some medical condition that requires care. So having as much information on their medical conditions is very important in the care, so that anyone who is stepping in at any point in time could carry on with that level of care, with the same quality of care, and the consistency is also maintained as much as possible. Similar to this is the care team members. So in this case, we want to, first of all, the caregiver themselves is part of the care team. Then we want to think about the clinicians and other members of the care team, and would see details of that in the workbook eventually in this presentation. Also, the emergency care instruction. If this happens, for example, if there is a fire disaster, fire outbreak, what is the next point in line? The person we are caring for, are they mobile? Can they move themselves to get out of, to get to a safe place, or they have to be evacuated, like they have to be physically evacuated? And then when they are evacuated, are they, depending on the nature of the disaster, do they have sufficient medication? Is an emergency bag packed already? Does they have every other thing they are going to need for? Many times we don't know how long an emergency situation is going to last for, but maybe we want to plan for at least a week or maybe 2 weeks, depending on the condition of the person, simply to ensure that they are not, they don't have a disruption in their care, and they have a level of assurance that they would be cared for if something happens. And this in turn or consequently gives a level of peace of mind, which is actually the title of the webinar, Peace of Mind to the caregiver and also the care recipient. And of course, the the care provider schedule, the task schedule, bills and bill payments, financial management, which is very important because some kind of emergencies or situation might not necessarily mean that would not pay bills or have financial obligations. So this is also very important as well. Emotional preparedness for and communication while creating a contingency plan. This is particularly important because as we have observed, and even in our personal and professional life, sometimes making a plan is something that many people don't find interesting. I mean, it's entails us to have to think back into the past, and then bring it forward into the present. And the most difficult part for most people is having to think into the future. So it does require a level of emotional preparedness, and particularly because this in a caregiving situation or scenario, many people are already experiencing some emotional sides of caregiving, like stress, like fear, like guilt, anger, and then added onto that, you're encouraging them to have a plan for what they don't even know if it will happen, but maybe it could happen, but we just want them to be prepared. So this requires a good level of communication between the care recipient and the caregiver. And one of the ways that could make this easy and smooth is to normalize the discussion. Just like one of the ways to do that is also attending this webinar today to know more about this topic, to know how to do it. And then with this knowledge, with this exposure, with this learning, we are able to go back to our space, our home, and the persons we're caring for to consider if this is something we want to do, which is highly recommended. But most importantly, we want to normalize the discussion to make it a part of, to understand that it is a normal part of caregiving and life generally, and it's not a big deal and something that would want to shy away from. And closely related to this is to encourage openness. Why are we doing this? Why is it important? What is it going to add to me? And sometimes we might, as caregivers, we might experience a level of resistance, maybe from the persons we're caring for, because they might not understand why we want to do this. They might even misconstrue it to say that, oh, are you thinking that maybe this is too much of a burden to you, that you even have to create a plan? Or it could come up in different ways, but encouraging openness, it will help to alleviate some fears and clear any doubts regarding the purpose and the reason why it's important to create a plan, to have a backup plan. It's just in case, but if something does happen, a backup plan comes in very handy and important. And we also want to involve key people in the process of creating a plan. I mentioned earlier that one of the key components of the contingency plan is the care team, which does, in this case, it's not just about the medical care, but also the personal care. So in this case, we want to involve, for example, the reason why we are making a plan as a caregiver is that if something happens and we are not able to care, so we want to involve the person who would probably be stepping in that regard. And we want to ask as many questions as possible and include those information into the plan. Okay. Also related to the point that I already stated is it's important for us to involve the care recipient in decision making, because why are we making a plan? It's because of the care recipient. If we were not caring for them, we won't even have to make a plan. So involving them and making them the center of the plan and assuring them of ongoing participation in their care, because if we come up to say, oh, let's make a plan for a time when I would not be available, then that in itself could create a level of anxiety to think that maybe they are being abandoned, or the caregiver does not want to be involved in their care any longer. But we, as caregiver, will provide an assurance of ongoing participation and explain how the information in the care plan, in the contingency plan would be used, stored, and shared, because this could also be one of the concerns why they might not want to be cooperative in contributing to the care. But if we let them know that, oh, this is the reason why we are creating is to ensure continuity of care, this is where it's going to be stored, maybe hard copy in the home or soft copy on a computer. Who is going to have access to this? When is this plan going to be used, and who is going to have access to the information? It could help to also prepare the care recipient. Now we are going to dive into the case scenario where we're going to spend some time, because we want this webinar to be as hands-on as possible. And I would like us to pay very good attention and also think along as we go through this case with our own caregiving situation and responsibilities, and see how it could be applicable to us. After the webinar, the flipbook, the recording, and the workbook would be available for us to go, for everyone to go over it and use it as a template for their care, so for their plan. So now this case scenario is we're highlighting a situation where there is an unexpected illness of the caregiver. And I'll read out the case, and from this slide, we'll transition into the workbook and we'll go over it. Jane, who is the caregiver? Jane cares for her 82-year-old mom named Laura, who is experiencing declining cognitive function. They live together in a condo apartment, and Jane works full-time as an administrator at a local bakery. Laura can manage most daily activities of living, but she requires mobility support from time to time. As a condition progresses, Jane is taking on more caregiving tasks, like assisting with transfers and bathing, as the increased responsibilities are now taking a toll on Jane's health, leading to a sudden illness that leaves her unable to care for her mom. Jane is worried about both her own health and her mom's well-being. And Laura, on the other side, also feels anxious and agitated. She's unsure of what will happen. And as I read out this case, I can imagine how many of us could relate with this situation. Maybe it's very similar to what we are currently experiencing. And what the purpose of this case scenario is to highlight that and answer the question regarding how Jane could have better prepared for a potential unexpected illness in the future so that Laura would not feel anxious and agitated, and more so that Jane herself would not feel worried about her own health and much more her mom's health, whom she has been primarily responsible for. I am going to share the workbook now. Can everyone see my slide, just to be sure? Okay, I got a note to say that my slide can be seen and large enough. So this is something very similar to what would see in for a contingency plan. This is what a contingency plan would look like. So, and like I mentioned in the flipbook created for this webinar, we would have a template that everyone could use to fill theirs. But this is an hypothetical scenario. It's not about anybody, and most of the information you're going to see here, they are just hypothetical. And so I would go right into different components and yeah. So right at the right-hand corner here, would see that this date was, the date this document was last updated was today, which is maybe right in as we're having this webinar, but of course, like I said, it's hypothetical. And the name of the care recipient is Laura Johnson. And Laura Johnson, this is a healthcare number, and she's living in British Columbia. She has a daughter named Jane, as we read in the case scenario, who is a main caregiver. They live together, if you remember, in a condo apartment. And Jane is working full time. Jane is Laura's daughter, and this is a phone number. So it's important to have this part of the information because it helps to identify the documents and make a good sense out of other information we would have going down or forwards. Next to that is emergency contact information. So in case of emergency, who do we call? So we have a list of 3 emergency contacts who can be reached immediately and who will assist in care. So remember that Jane is the daughter and the primary caregiver, but Laura also has another daughter and a son, Marty, and another daughter who is Jessica. This is a phone number, and if something happens and Jane is not able to care for Laura, then Jessica is the next person in line, and she would have to live with, she would need to live in with Laura. And like I mentioned earlier, this is one of the reasons why it's important to carry along everyone who is to engage everyone who is involved in the plan. Because look at it in this case, Jessica would need to move in with Laura, or at least they will have to make an arrangement for them to be able to live together, because essentially Laura cannot live alone. So it's either Laura moves in with Jessica or Jessica moves in with Laura if something happens to Jane. Laura also has a sister, Becky. This is her phone number. And if something happens, one of the things that Becky will be helping with is food and grocery. And Laura has a son, Marty. If something happens to Jessica, and even currently, probably Marty is helping with transportation, drop off to medical appointments, etc. And one of the information would also have on the care plan is, does Laura have a DNR, that's do not resuscitate instruction? In this case, she does not have. So, but if she has, we also need to specify the location of the document or any other thing that communicates that to us. So we state where it's located, we'll put it in this document, such that if anyone is picking up this document, they know what Laura would like or would not like, even though Jane is the person caring for her, but this document tells us in the absence of Jane. Okay. Now, the caregiver role assessment. Previously, Jane has been doing almost everything, most things for Laura because they live together, and it's not a big deal to her. After all, Jane is Laura's daughter and she's happy caring for her mother. She finds it to be a blessing. Yeah, so, but if something happens to Jane, then what's going to happen? Some of the activities that Jane performs for Laura are listed here. It could be more than this and it could be different for different people. It could be more specific, but this is a hypothetical case and we are going to just walk through it, but these are the examples of activities that should be documented. That should be documented. So I'll go over a couple of them to say, for example, personal care like bathing and dressing. Even though Laura could bathe herself, but she do need some help with transporting her into the bathtub and maybe getting her out. And Jane has been helping with that. But if Jane is not able to help, then it's Jessica who would be helping with that. And medication administration, Jane has been helping with that, but if Jane is not able to, Jessica could do that, or Becky, who is Laura's sister. I'll jump right into transportation. For example, Jane or Jessica, sometimes when she comes in, she is able to drop off their mom at an appointment, but if Jane is not available, because Jessica is now having to do much more in place of Jane, Maddie could, for example, step in for that. And this is how you want to think about your plan when you're making one, to make it as realistic as possible, to have a plan A, plan B, if possible, plan C, and if everything else does not work, what is that other thing that could be done? And we want to document that as much as possible. And usually Becky will provide social emotional support, spiritual support to Laura. But now that if something happens, if Becky is not able to do that, then Jessica could do that, Maddie could do that. So we could also add additional notes right here to say that, for example, on the personal care, it would normally take her bath 5 times a week, housekeeping, weekly meal plan, as per meal plan is used for preparation, and maybe this is stocked to the fridge or somewhere in the kitchen area. And another key section to this is the care recipient information, which is very important. If you remember, I said earlier that we want to know as much as possible about the person we are caring for, and we also want to document it such that another person, when they're stepping in, they are able to do it seamlessly and without having to struggle to care for them. So this section, we captured key details like the name of the care recipient. They just prefer to be called Laura. They were born, their date of birth, where they were born, the things they like to do, names of family member. We already stated this and identified how they are related to the care recipient, and their career, for example, what they like to do, their hobbies. For example, Laura, she used to play basketball and hiking, but recently she prefers to spend quiet time on the couch and gentle walks around the home. So, as much tiny, minute, but important details that helps us to know and understand the person we want to document, that likes, dislikes. And for example, in this case here, we have documented that Laura does not like loud noise. So we want to protect them from that as much as possible. Uh, Say, for example, they are going out of the house, or don't want to take them to places where they could be exposed to loud noise because it triggers anxiety for them, and we don't want that to happen because we care about them. And other important information, we mentioned earlier that Laura is experiencing decline in their cognitive ability, but there is no specific diagnosis. But we also want the person who will be stepping in to have an idea and have this knowledge so that they are aware, and this informs the way they care for Laura. And more information about their medical diagnosis, if any. But in this case, Laura has chronic kidney disease and any other diagnosis like arthritis, high blood pressure, that they are being treated for, which means that they will have medications they are using for these conditions. And we mentioned earlier that she has mobility issues and some declining cognitive function. And we would also want to note specific details. For example, here she's using assistive device, mobility device, two-wheel walker. So if someone is stepping in place of Jane, they want to ask, and Laura wants to move around, they would ask, where is the walker? If they don't see it around, they would know that possibly Laura is not able to get up from sitting by themselves. They need to be aided and use their walker. But if this is not documented in the first place and Jane is not able to provide this information, even other substitute caregiver that comes in once in a while, this would also be useful for them to provide care, even if Jane is available. It's just to say that this contingency plan is very, very important to have. And also for the primary caregiver, even if nothing happens, sometimes having the activities we do daily documented, it helps to give a sense of organization, a sense of control that brings peace of mind to know that I know what I am doing kind of feeling. Yeah. Also important to document is if the person have allergy, which is very important. It could be to medications, it could be to any kind of food or other non-food materials. Reason why it's important is so that will protect the care recipient for this. And then this chart is to document any daily activities like meals, when they would normally eat, what medications are they taking, where are they located, when would they normally have their bathing, do they practice mindfulness moment? Maybe they like to just go out of the house, sit on the patio and observe the wind or the sunshine. Those are the kind of things we want to document in this section. And it's well broken down into different times of the day: morning, mid-morning, afternoon, evening, and it covers as much most important details that a person would do, activities they would do in a day. For example, as an additional note here, we could write here to say that bedtime for Laura is at 8:30 p.m. And usually you want to give her about 30 minutes to get prepared and to be ready for the transition. Just to say, Laura, I'm going to be helping you to get to bed in about 30 minutes. And then they are prepared and they don't feel rushed. And it doesn't, for example, Laura has anxiety issues. It will reduce the anxiety and make the transition easier for them. And in terms regarding medications, large pills should be cut for easy swallowing. And it could be any other thing, say maybe they have intolerance to lactose or milk products. We want to include it here, or how they would prefer to use their medication, maybe with plain water or some kind of soft drink or anything as already instructed. We want to document that. Yeah. Now this section is about the care team, which we spoke a little bit about, but here we want to provide all the details who is responsible for their care. So Jane is the primary caregiver, Jessica is the substitute, Betty is also going to help when needed, and we'll include their phone numbers here so that they could be contacted when needed. The primary physician is Dr. Rex, social worker is Lisa. The pharmacist, Beth, is important because sometimes some information about their medication is not available at home, or they have some interactions, medical interactions that are not documented with their doctor. So, want to keep as much information. And neighbors, some persons don't regard their neighbors if it's applicable as part of their care team, but it's important. They are probably the first persons to know if something has happened just by observation and normal interaction. So we want to identify those persons we say hello to on our street, in our neighborhood, because they could come in handy, maybe not to bathe or to feed, but they could be willing to take out trash if needed, or maybe mow their lawn or something. Neighbors could be helpful when applicable and when needed. And of course, medication routine, what medications are they taking, what strength, when would they normally take it, who prescribed it in case we have any questions, who do we reach out to, and any other medications they are using, maybe not prescribed by the doctor, just over the counter. We also want to document that so that anyone who is going to be helping would be aware of that. I'm going to take a quick sip. All right. This next section, like I mentioned earlier, is very important, and it's an area that we might be needing help with. I mean, help of professionals to help us if we don't already have those documents, legal document, financial document, like power of attorney, health representation, and they become important if, for example, the persons we're caring for are not able to make decisions by themselves, and we have a legal right to make those decisions for them. So if we have those documents, we also want to state where they are located and who has access to them. Say, for example, if they are hard copies, maybe they are logged in a particular part of the house and who has access to them. If they are soft copies, we want to know where they are stored. And for emergency preparedness, we want to think about a time when there is like a natural disaster and what to do, pickups, and who would do, we want to pack and make ready an emergency care plan that contains essential items like non-perishable foods, medications, very important, warm clothing, and designated place to go to when that happens. Also, close to that is if the caregiver becomes ill, which is the case that we are currently discussing. Where is the plan located? If it's a paper copy, is it saved in? Is it kept in a particular location? If it's soft copy, who has the access and all of that? And if there is sudden hospitalization, these are just examples of emergency situation and how we can prepare for them. Also, we want to leave contact information for example, local emergency services. Everyone knows to call 911 if something happens, but in some areas, they might have another local number that they would call. And then poison control, just in case if there's a case of poisoning, we want to call them to ask for what to do, and they could be guided. It could be different from locations to locations. So we want to find out about that and document that so that it is not when that emergency is already happening and we have less control. That's when we are trying to figure out everything. But if we have a document, we just go to it and use it because we've already prepared for that time to a very good extent. So as an additional note, we might note who the POA is. And so in this case, Jane and Jessica are co-POA. That's why Jessica could easily step in for Jane when if Jane is not able to to care for their mom. In some cases, we might not have the luxury of having two siblings caring for the same parent, but whoever it is that could make decision on their behalf, we want to document that and make it accessible. And this brings us to the end of this part. I'll stop sharing now and go to the end. Next slide, Marjan. So this is just like a wrap up. We already talked about this. It's important knowing that this is a living document. We continue to live. It's not an end of a life or end of a situation kind of thing. Things will continue to change around us for good, hopefully, and sometimes not so good, but would be able to update these documents and make them as realistic and up to date as possible. And ideally, we want to update it every 6 to 12 months, or in addition to that, before any major life changes, maybe a major surgery, or maybe transition to maybe long-term care, or any major life changes. We want to update this to just, say, for example, in our case scenario, Jessica will be going for a major surgery, which means that if something happens to Jane, Jessica cannot fill in. So we want to update the documents to show who is next in line and make it realistic and applicable to time as possible. Then we want to check in with the care team. Next slide, please. So that brings us to the end of the presentation. I will turn it over back to Marjan to facilitate the other part. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ibu-kun. So as we're nearing the end, we have 2 poll questions that we would appreciate if you could answer. I'm just going to launch those now. So you should see on your screen some questions pop up. If you can choose the one that resonates most with you. Once we get a few answers, we'll be able to move on to the Q&A, and then we should be done from there. I'm seeing a lot of people are feeling more confident about creating a contingency plan after this webinar, and that's amazing to hear. I see a lot of people are going to decide to make a contingency plan and review their existing one. Amazing. So while people are still answering that, we can move on to the Q&A. So I can read them out for you, Ibu-kun, if that's helpful.
Okay.
So someone asked, how can I have input for my parents' proper care? So I'm assuming they want to know who they could speak to be able to kind of go through this.
Yeah, like I said during the presentation, we want to involve the care team as much as possible. And particularly, we want to involve the care recipient themselves if they are able to participate in this plan. So one of the first things we want to think about is the person who is going to be the substitute if the caregiver is not able to. And also other people that could give input would be the medical care team, pharmacist, physician, social worker, and other relatives, or anyone who is going to appear in the plan should definitely be, involved.
So I guess this kind of transitions to the next question, but they're just wondering what happens when you don't have any family or friends that want to help or are unable to help. They're saying, do I hire strangers? But they can't afford that. So are there other options out there?
Yeah, that's a difficult situation. It's quite challenging when there is, when we think that there is no one. First, I am always, I'm usually very careful to help people to help people, not to help, but to help people to think in a different way when they think they don't have anyone at all. because sometimes we tend to assume that people are not willing to help, but maybe we have not asked. Or another thing that could help is to make a list of what we're currently doing for the person we're caring for, and ask people in specific ways to say, can you help with grocery shopping? Can you help with medical appointments? So sometimes if we are able to detail those activities and tasks, it might be easier to find a person to help. Maybe not all of the time would they be available to do that, maybe once in a while, but would not be totally in a space where we don't have anyone helping. But if that happens, I've had a case of a time when someone called a caregiver support line and they were just a neighbor to the person they are calling for. So sometimes we want to explore the people that we physically have around us. And also we want to engage in our community. That's where we could build friendships and connections. And we are not looking to make them family or overburden them with our responsibilities, but we want to be as friendly and as familiar with them such that we might be able to ask them for help. And if all of that does not also fall in place, then we'll have to depend on the system to make an arrangement with the home and community care. We want to let them know the current situation. I'm caring for my mom. I'm the only one caring. If something happens, her life, my life is at risk, and we want to be able to do something. Lastly, as I was just saying that technology also helps in this regard. We have a lot of technology devices that people use now these days, that maybe an attachment that helps to detect when there is a fall, or if there is if something had happened, and then there is a system that could be alerted and then someone would come in. So we just want someone to know, even if it means relying on the government system or technology. Yeah.
Oh, they're saying, what does POA stand for?
Power of attorney. It's usually used in regards to financial responsibility. So if I am not able to make decision for myself, I have given authority to my sister to make a decision on my behalf. And whatever she says, I want you to respect it. That's power of attorney regarding my financial situation. And then related to that, which is with regards to health, is health representative. Say, for example, I could give, if my sister is my health representative and I'm not able to give consent for a surgical procedure, maybe I'm now unconscious, and they have to make a decision for me. Then my sister is my health representative. I give her authority. Whatever she says, I want you to respect it. The other side to this is, if there is no person appointed, then the system would have to come in. For example, in the place of, if there is no power of attorney already assigned, maybe the person will be open to being taken decision for by a public guardian. If it's a health decision, the medical doctor will just have to use their discretion to do what they think is right for the person. But it's helpful if you have a wish to assign someone who could carry out that wish for you if you're not able to communicate.
And we'll just do one last question. And they're saying, who can help support administration or healthcare navigation for these documents? For instance, who can help support with the process of getting like a social worker or filling out forms?
No, you mean creating a plan, this plan, the contingency plan, or how do you mean?
I think they just want to know, like, if they don't know how to do it, who can they connect with to be able to help them through with this process?
That's a good question, and I have not particularly thought about it before now. But I would say a social worker could help. There are usually also some volunteers in the community, maybe for seniors, through seniors organizations, who could be available to help with working on this document, to create a document. And yeah, those are the two that quickly comes to mind. And if this person could call a caregiver support line, we don't help to create a plan, but maybe we could explore options together depending on where they're living and connect them to organizations that might have volunteers that could help with this. And I also mentioned that there are some parts of the document that they would need like professional guidance, like if they don't already have a POA, if they don't already have health representation document, they would need professional, but they could be guided if they call the caregiver support line to know who to call.
Speaking of the caregiver support line, this is the number to call. If you have any questions or need support navigating. So this is the end of our webinar. We will be sending you all a follow-up email with a survey to hear your thoughts and feedback regarding this webinar. So please keep an eye out for that. And in that email, we will also make sure to include this workbook. So you have the opportunity to be able to fill out your own contingency plan. But everyone will be able to have access to this workbook soon on our website. And that's it. Thank you for attending today, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.